Hello, and thank you to AFSIC for hosting us today, and I'm very sorry not to be with you in person. It's really wonderful to see so many of you here to discuss the biggest challenges and opportunities facing Africa today. I recently returned from my first visit to Southern Africa in my new role as Minister for Africa. And in South Africa, Lesotho and Eswatini, I was able to see firsthand and hear firsthand about the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. And that's why the UK's work in partnership with African countries to boost trade and investment and unlock reforms and support a green transition remains so crucial. Before entering politics, I was sitting where you are now. I was a banker, and I know from my own experience how hard it can be to raise funding for infrastructure in African countries. And that is why it's so important for the public and private sectors to come together at forums like this to increase the volume of sustainable finance. The UK is committed to working with African countries to increase their economic growth, and we want to support a safer, greener, healthier, and more open continent which is more resilient to shocks and stresses. And there are 4 key elements to this work, and your support as private sector partners is critical to delivering our shared ambitions. The first element is supporting vaccination efforts in African countries and their recovery from the pandemic. The UK is one of the leading donors to COVAX. It's helped 47 African countries to access around 65 million vaccine doses. And we've also donated more than 6 million vaccine doses directly to African nations and have pledged to deliver 100 million doses across the developing world by June of next year. We've also supported vaccine manufacture in Africa, especially through technical support and advice. We are helping to ensure that vaccines reach those who need them most. But we're also supporting economic development in African countries and creating jobs. Through our 100% shareholding of CDC, a development finance organisation, the UK is supporting companies that are boosting the economies and development of African countries. During the pandemic, when other commercial investors retreated from markets in Africa, CDC continued to support countries to tackle the economic and health impacts of COVID. It made more than £800 million of investment commitments in Africa in 2020. And through our G7 presidency, we were working with other development finance institutions to boost investment in African countries and build back better after COVID. Together, CDC, G7 development finance institutions, and multilateral development banks, many of whom are represented here today, have committed to invest more than $80 billion into African businesses over the next 5 years. The second important piece of work is our partnership with African governments and with all of you, business leaders and investors, to boost African economies. This is helping to lift people out of poverty, create good jobs, and reduce inequality. At the UK Africa Investment Summit in January of last year, which many of you participated in, we laid the foundations for new partnerships between the UK and African nations based on trade, investment, and shared values. And these new partnerships cut across both the private and public sectors. At the summit, we announced more than £15 billion of commercial deals between UK companies and African partners. And partnership with the private sector is key here. And the City of London has a huge role to play as the global gateway for sustainable international investment. In 2020, African issuers raised $17 billion on the London Stock Exchange, and London is supporting Africa's green finance ambitions. Recently, Egypt became the first sovereign green bond issuer from Africa to list in London, attracting strong demand from global investors and raising $750 million. Earlier this year, Benin raised €500 million with Africa's first sovereign SDG bond in London. A total of 128 African companies operating across more than 25 African countries are listed on the London Stock Exchange, more than any stock exchange outside of the continent. And it's great to see some of those companies, such as Investec and EFG Hermes, here today. The UK government is also supporting Dealroom, which is currently working on more than 100 deals. It's looking to match African capital seekers with UK investors, helping to mobilise private investment in sustainable projects across Africa. For example, with support from Dealroom, Infocus Africa, who are also here today, are involved in the development of the Corbeti geothermal. This is one of the first privately developed, owned and operated geothermal independent power producers in Ethiopia. With the African Development Bank estimating that infrastructure needs in Africa are 68 to 108 billion US dollars each year, investment in this area is critical. And that's why our UK credit agency, UK Export Finance, has supported £5 billion worth of major infrastructure projects in Africa in the last decade. Examples include upgrading Kumasi Teaching Hospital in Ghana, creating 750 beds for maternity care. UK Export Finance provided $2.3 billion of guarantees and loans in the last financial year alone. Furthermore, we're determined that our financial sector will be at the forefront of technology and innovation in the 21st century. Alongside investors such as Catalyst Fund, who join us today, we'll continue to support the digitalisation of financial services as a means of enabling greater financial inclusion in African countries. Advancing financial inclusion is an effective method of achieving sustained poverty alleviation and inclusive growth, strengthening the financial well-being and resilience of individuals, equipping them to better prepare for and manage shocks. As I've set out, we're focused on ensuring we can help to unlock greater levels of private sector financing into Africa. And as part of this, the UK government has championed impact investment for over a decade. In our G7 presidency year, the UK government supported the Impact Task Force, a financial sector initiative made up of leaders in the global impact investing market. It will make recommendations to governments, regulators, investors on how to improve standards and grow the amount of impact investment globally. And alongside this, in the UK, we will launch new requirements for businesses and financial products to disclose sustainability information so that consumers and investors can clearly see how UK businesses are meeting their environmental, social and governance commitments in practice. Which brings me on to our third ambition, and it's another shared ambition. And this is to lead the way in responding to the challenge of climate change and support Africa's transition to net zero. Next month, at the COP26 summit, the UK will bring together leaders from across the globe to support the nations which are most vulnerable to climate change. And we know that African countries will bear the brunt of climate change. Shifting weather patterns are already having catastrophic impacts, creating vulnerabilities to food, water and energy security, as well as broader stability. Yet African countries receive less than a quarter of international climate finance. Since the Paris Agreement 6 years ago, significant progress has been made. Both the World Bank and the African Development Bank have committed to providing half of all of their climate finance for adaptation and resilience. CDC has ring-fenced 30% of its future investments for climate finance. But more can be done by the public sector to also leverage international private capital flows to enable African countries to meet their NDCs. And I want to assure you that as the COP president, we in the UK are working hard to deliver on this ambition, in less than a month's time. Financial sector Deepening Africa is a market facilitator funded by UK aid. It has catalysed some of the continent's most significant green finance deals. This includes the first sovereign green bond in Nigeria, and together with the Private Infrastructure Development Group, in which the UK is the largest shareholder, FSD Africa catalysed the issuance of a green bond by Acorn Holdings, which raised $42 million for the development of low-carbon residential buildings in Kenya. And we will continue to support access to green finance by building the policy and regulatory environment needed to achieve this. And you all have a role to play in this by engaging with governments, central banks and regulators on green standards, frameworks and reporting. Looking ahead to the future, the mobilise engine room, which is funded by the UK, will generate proposals for green investment products and inject capital from institutional investors such as green guarantee platforms and green infrastructure funds. And alongside this, the Green Finance Transactions Accelerator, which is delivered by FSD Africa, will support more innovative and complex green transactions. And this includes building a market for microcarbon credits through the innovative new digital platform 4RD, which is on display here today. Green infrastructure is essential if we are to meet climate goals, especially in rapidly expanding cities. And that's why we're supporting African governments to develop, procure and finance more climate resilience infrastructure projects. This includes supporting transport and urban planning in Lagos and green building technology in Nairobi, which will reduce emissions and increase resilience to climate change. It's also very important that industry in Africa is geared to support our net zero ambitions. Key sectors like cement, fertiliser and steel producers must radically reduce their emissions, and upfront investment is also needed from investors like you to make that happen. The UK is also keen to support African countries in improved technology, such as carbon capture and storage, and to help develop new regulation, such as carbon pricing. Firms such as Mazi Mobility, an electric motorbike producer in Kenya, are demonstrating that there are real commercial opportunities right now for investors in green manufacturing in African countries. This includes work for their independent impact task force, which was set up under our G7 presidency, which will work towards a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the pandemic. Finally, but just as importantly, flourishing economies must be underpinned by quality education, particularly for girls. This is one of the smartest investments we can make. If all girls were completing secondary education by 2030, the GDP of developing countries would be boosted by 10%, according to a recent report from Citi's Global Insights team. And as part of our commitment to 12 years of quality education for every girl, we co-hosted the Global Education Summit with Kenya in July. We made our largest ever pledge of £430 million to the Global Partnership for Education Fund, and the summit raised over $4 billion, delivering the single biggest financial boost to children's educational opportunities in history. We're also trying innovative ways of mobilising private finance to boost education. For example, in partnership with the Government of Ghana, we're launching a fund that will pay up to £22 million to improve opportunities for 1,200 primary school children. It will also help to get 75,000 out of school children back into education. These are just some examples of the exciting and dynamic partnerships we're building to secure a green and more prosperous future for Africa and the UK. Over the next 2 days, this forum represents a great chance to connect, to share ideas, and to seize opportunities. I hope you have an excellent conference, and I can't wait to hear the results.